Were our hearts not burning within us? That was the line that jumped out to Jen, Will, and I. Were our hearts not burning within us? Sometimes I think we go out into the world looking for big moments, big dramatic unfoldings in our life. But I wonder if sometimes Spirit speaks to us more subtly, that we encounter life and the path, and little things set our heart a-burning. We have two very different testimonies from two people about what it's like to notice their heart catch fire. Sometimes it leads in one direction, and sometimes it leads on a much more windy path. Let's hear the testimony from Ursula and Ian on what set their heart afire.
Hi, my name's Ursula, and I'm the Bookings and Communications Coordinator at St. Andrews Wesley. I want to tell you about a project we're working on at STAW, but first let me share with you how this project came to be. In October 2019, my heart broke when news came out that the current Chilean government started to commit human rights violations against peaceful protesters. I was seeing images and hearing accounts of horrendous acts of violence committed against protesters. These acts of violence mirrored those of the military regime committed against the Chilean people, like my parents, in the 1970s and 80s. You see, Chile had regained its democracy in 1990, and with that, the hope for a more just and equal society. But this didn't happen. Economic injustice was woven into the very fabric of Chile's democratic system. Years and years of neoliberal economic policy has led Chile to become one of the most economically unjust countries in the world, where rivers can be privatized and sold forever, where a river that once flowed for 1 million years is now a dry waste and its waters diverted into private pools. The list of economic injustices is too long to go into, but a few very quickly are: the theft of pensions, the privatization of everything, corporations owning mountains, rivers, and even indigenous territories. They would privatize the air if they could. In an instant, I became a political activist, knowing that this was always in my DNA, but now seeing that these injustices were occurring for the second time in my life, I could no longer remain on the sidelines without a response. First, we organized ourselves here in Vancouver to create awareness of what was going on in Chile. We had weekly meetings, raised funds to support the maimed and wounded demonstrators, many of whom were maimed for life, held cultural events to express our support creatively, and demonstrated peacefully ourselves in solidarity with the Chilean people. My partner Rod and I had been planning a trip to Chile for about a year when all this happened. We debated whether or not to go. We had serious apprehensions as the violence was real. The oppression was real, but so was our need to respond and our need to see our homeland and family. So instead of canceling the trip, we decided to go. Now we were in the epicenter of the movement. Literally, we were staying within walking distance of the movement's epicenter. We are witnessing the massive creative spirit of the Chilean people on walls, in the street art, and graffiti everywhere we went. Everywhere we went, we saw the fearless response to the government oppression, in the voices of the street musicians, in the vendors selling vegan food on the streets, in the conversation with Uber drivers. Everywhere a sense of energy, a response to injustice, a desire for equality. All this energy and experiences ignited a fire in my heart. It inspired and helped me to cultivate an artistic expression in the form of an arpillera. An arpillera is a form of resistance art using the medium of textiles depicting scenes of injustice. They help denounce human rights violations. It is recognized as a subversive women's art in an authoritarian political context. I found that through this textile art medium, I could reach out to communities and build connections and awareness for so much injustice we see today. We could even expand the vision of what arpilleras were to incorporate and express how we feel about injustices here at home now. such as environmental justice, the housing crisis, and justice for the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We don't need violent oppression to create resistance art. We just need to see clearly that there are people that are suffering, that their basic human rights are not being met even here in Canada. Until the day when every sentient being and its environment is protected, there is need for resistance art. The arpillera is a form of art that I chose to express and share with the Staw community. The final goal is to install and present it on the hoarding wall on Nelson Street in the near future. We invite you to come by and experience the art. Our desire is to inspire you and the community to feel the fire within you for a more just and loving world.
Hello, everyone. So I used to have passion envy. So what does that mean? Well, you know, I went through some years of my life where if you'd asked me what I was passionate about, I might have just told you that I don't know. It wouldn't have been a lie. I would look at all these happily self-actualized people around, and I wondered why I didn't get to feel like how they looked, you know? Like, I mean, I had things in my life that I enjoyed doing, but I didn't really feel that deeply connected to them. Like if they'd all stopped at once, it wouldn't have been the end of my world or anything. And so the questions this week get to some pretty pure places of the human experience, you know, like what is it that sets your soul on fire? You know, what is it that drives you and makes you the most who you are, and what can't you stop doing because otherwise, you know, you wouldn't be you, and what are your passions and how do they lead you in your life? And for a while, I just couldn't figure out what I was passionate about, you know, despite all the pressure from the Lululemon shopping bags that were everywhere that would tell everyone to go live their passions and all this. And even now, I wouldn't really say that I'm led by my passions. You know, I'm usually excessively practical, and like many of us, the snapshots of my life are, you know, vastly more interesting than, you know, than watching a time-lapse video of me in my living room or anything. And what I've come to realize pretty recently, like Wednesday, I think, was that I've been looking for something far too specific, and that instead maybe I just shouldn't be looking. And this week a friend of mine turned me on to this book that I totally didn't read, but like any good millennial, I read the Wikipedia page for it, and what struck me was the author's view that the meaning of life is found in every moment of living. Whoa. So when I think about the things that I love doing, you know, like rock climbing and telling jokes and fire spinning and riding my bike and writing and volunteering my time to make just totally bizarre art projects, I realize that what I love most in any of these things is just reacting to the moments. And the thing I'm looking for, maybe I just need to shut up and listen for. You know, like it's the inner voice that tells me like, hey, try this, or, you know, travel light and hang on tight, or you know, that maybe I should just go ahead and make that really, really great, you know, phenomenal pun, but, you know, whatever. It's even like this feeling, you know, this like the palpable excitement, you know, this vibrating that I feel in my eyeballs when I'm truly firing. It's like the spark where suddenly there's possibility where before there was just a mistake or a hilarious way to connect two disparate ideas that in something that I'm writing, or even just when I see an inanimate object that just desperately needs a pair of googly eyes. Basically at its essence, it's just about coming alive a little bit more in whatever I'm doing, you know. So the short answer these days to the question of what my passions are, I would amend from I don't know to I don't know yet. Case in point, as soon as I stopped this video, I just fell through my chair, and it's totally hilarious.
Well, when we invite people to take a risk with a testimony, I don't think that's exactly what we mean. So now we owe Ian a chair. Thank you both, Ursula and Ian, for those testimonies. In both, you hear different journeys down a path. You hear the patience involved in wondering. And you hear the courage it takes to follow something when you don't really know where it will end up. Yet you trust in the signal of your heart being on fire. But let's return to the story. The disciples walk along the path, and they're turning the story of resurrection over and over between them, trying to make sense of it. The world has changed, or at least that's what everyone is saying, but it's unclear how and to what end. They meet a stranger on the road, and he asks them, "What are you talking about?" So they engage him in conversation. He says some interesting things. He's oddly compelling, and they feel their pulses quicken. And on impulse, they ask him, come eat with us. They continue to talk, finding themselves energized and hopeful, their heart alight by the conversation. And then the stranger breaks the bread and offers it to them. And in that oh so familiar gesture, they suddenly recognize him. And with that, he vanishes. It's a brief glimpse. This story and this time we're in, I'm having trouble pulling them apart. For me, they're a little bit like those Russian nesting dolls, the metrochoika, those little people who build off of each other, containing pieces of each other, lovely on their own, but shaped so similarly that it doesn't entirely make sense to see them individually, but only as a set. Because here we are too, like the confused disciples, finding it easier to look back on the path than forward, turning the story of COVID-19 over and over again with friends and family, where all the while, right at our feet, there is a moment to pause and notice, where might our heart be set on fire in this time? Where might we be burning with spirit, she who uses flame to get our attention, to burn purpose back into our souls? For it's in the looking back sometimes that we can see more clearly what Spirit is trying to tell us, rather than in the moment we're enmeshed in with our fears, our worries, our desires, our goals. I think one of the most challenging things about this time for me is the realization that while we're all participating in an experience together, we're not having the same experience. For every retiree who's trying to use this time just to work on their garden, there's someone in the downtown east side who has spent years in a state of uncertainty and trauma, who just last weekend finally got an apartment of their own where they can be safe and clean. For every person who missed a hoped-for vacation, there is someone out of work right now, homeschooling 2 children and wondering, what next? And for every picture of a young person flocking to the beach, there is a 20-year-old who doesn't know when they'll work again. And with each month that passes, they know their dream of going to college is delayed. And they can't even spend time with their friends to talk about it. So we're sharing an experience together, each from different lenses. And what is reflected back at us right now is an imbalance that the early disciples would have been aware of. Somehow, even in a land of plenty, of abundant life, there is not enough for all of us. Now, this is not a new insight. We know this already. We knew it well before COVID. I don't think you would be here attending a virtual church, participating in a 2,000-year-old faith if you had not had your own heart lit on fire with the possibility that this wondrous world this abundant life could include each and every one of us and our precious planet too. Who among you have not had your heart broken by something that just wasn't right, and then set aflame by the hope that it could be different? And so maybe now is the time to try and see those tiny flames that might be a light in this situation. Not to build a false hope that everything's going to be fine because it wasn't before, but because by looking right now, we might indeed find a better way forward. In every moment, Spirit is giving us a pause point to see the longing that God has for the world and for us. And our hint might just be what sets our own hearts ablaze, what startles and disturbs us, and what lures us forward like a campfire on a pitch black winter's night. So where in this moment may the Spirit have set our hearts a-burning? I wonder if we have seen Spirit walking ahead on the path with all those things that have been put in place right now that we were told were just not possible. We now have people with a guaranteed income right now, so for once they're not living hand to mouth. That was impossible, but we're doing it. We've watched an aching planet that's needed us to reduce our emissions right now all of a sudden have a chance to breathe. And that's not even a metaphor at the moment. Watching creatures emerge, it's all happening right now, and they're flourishing. And okay, if you live in Wales, they're flourishing too much. Mountain goats are taking over the town, but still, who would have thought? And for every person who's crawled through the appalling Vancouver commute and asked their work, could we try working from home, and been told, oh, it's impossible. Somehow we've pivoted. Schools and some companies removing congested motorways, pivoting and allowing people to work differently. Now, I'm not saying these are all great solutions or sustainable solutions or even the right ones or enough, but isn't it interesting? When the threat of mortality hit us collectively, the response showed us that at least here in Canada, we actually do value people more than money, more than status, more than the way that we needed to. And this was and is no fantasy, actually, for us to imagine and create a world where people might be cared for, where the planet might be treated as precious, and where economies and human lives are given the right weight. So maybe right now you have felt a flame of hope in watching some of this, even in the challenge and the despair of this time, when you witness some of the shifts that are happening. But if looking at the world this week has been just too much, then maybe look at the canvas of your own life. In our own ordinary lives, we have this miracle that Spirit actually bothers to tug on our own heart too. She burns in each and every one of us. We heard from Ursula and Ian on how their very different paths were set alight and courses were changed. And we know that Spirit calls directly to us. We might be reminded by these words from John, the beloved knows your name, not the name everyone else says, but the name that brings you life. So even in this time, Spirit will call us all to new life right now. Even in this time that feels like a perpetual Lent or a constant Holy Saturday on repeat, who knows, even in a time of pause, it might actually be possible for us to listen more carefully to God's call to us. For Spirit is calling us to be awake in each moment, each breath, each minute. And we can pay attention to where our hearts are lit up and try to live from that place. Spirit wants us awake and ready. She's launching an unquenchable hope. And while getting by and being safe and dealing with the immediate needs of right now is very important, and we'll all get enmeshed in that, it isn't actually the spiritual work we're invited to do. So, like disciples on the path, we too can do resurrection work. We can be attentive. We can find the places that set our soul afire. And we can try to live out that promise of change in a world that needs healing and help and justice. So we invite you this week to take a look while you journey on the path. Take note of any time your heart is set aflame with the desire for the planet to be protected, or the poor to be fed, or the economy to be a just system, or even just for your own kindness and compassion to feel like a larger gift than it sometimes feels like to you. And if you need to paint or dance or plant or mend or sing or play or even scream a little, if that fans the flame right now, make some time to do that too. For the time is now to uncover what God is calling us to do and be as we walk into an Easter world that has the potential to be set alight with a true and lasting hope. May it be so. Amen.